Cyril, your excuses are your legacy. Your empowerment is paper rich and ground poor. You are calling a trillion redistribution, but wrote yourself into the redistribution. You are lecturing the world on historical injustice, but exemplify ongoing privilege. You are the boardroom dropout who got handed a nation because of apartheid guilt. Now you are leaning into apartheid blame while doubling down on the very system that cooked your wealth into the national recipe it is now.
My guest is a popular young South African social media activist, the host of the YouTube channel, the Sama Sambit podcast, a young podcaster with a huge following. I think I checked this morning, 50,000 plus people that are following you. And you're an unrelenting critic of the African National Congress government, its policies, its president, our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. You're a critic of BEE, Black Economic Empowerment. You're a critic of the expropriation of land without compensation bill. You're a critic, if I'm correct, of the Bella Act. You're a critic of the National Health Insurance Bill, which aims to provide universal access to quality healthcare for all South Africans as enshrined in our Constitution. You're a critic of government corruption, incompetence, non-delivery, policies, visions, etc., and so I can carry on. So, Sama, to start with, is there anything that the African National Congress has done or is doing that's good?
I think the ANC has a lot of evil within it. They've got a lot of things they need to fix. And until that, they will continue to only scratch a fraction of their true potential, which is just do nothing but, supply the basic needs of the country and continue to exploit everyone else in every way possible.
Yeah. Was there ever a time that your view of the African National Congress was different? And perhaps, and maybe I'm a little bit rude now, give me an idea of your age, if you don't mind. And that's one part of the question. The second part is what you're saying, do you think what you're saying is reflective of more young Black people in South Africa, of the views of more young Black people in South Africa? So first, I want to know how old you are, and then tell me how reflective of the rest of young South Africa, Black South Africa, are your views?
Well, I actually turned 19 in April.
Goodness gracious.
And, I barely ever share this with anyone. You'll see it on my Instagram or my Twitter page. But usually when someone asks me about my age, especially in like public gatherings, I'll maybe like slip in a little white lie and say I'm like, 22 or something, because I look like it. I don't look like a 19-year-old who just finished his matric and is now doing his final year in varsity. I actually look a lot older than that. So I kind of slip in that lie. But I am, 19 years old. And for sure, I think there was a point in time where every single Black young South African believed in the African National Congress. Not only because we were emotionally blackmailed with it, but there was actually a period of time where the African National Congress was the political party. They just freed us from the apartheid regime. They, day by day, were bringing us closer and closer to the promised land. The land they promised, by the way, the South African dream. And that got us to host the World Cup. That got us to, have more equal rights regardless of skin color. A lot of things were going on for South Africa. There was definitely a point in time where every single young person you could ask down the street, Black, white, colored, or Asian, could have told you they were with the ANC because they freed us from the apartheid regime. But that right there is the problem. That's the only reason they can give you, if not the main reason. We cannot keep saying we like the ANC because they freed us from such a regime. We cannot use the past to justify their current evil actions. And I cannot continue saying I vote for the ANC as a law-abiding South African because they freed us from a regime that happened 30 years ago. That is simply an excuse for the many shortcomings that we had upon us. And because of that, a lot of Black youth have actually moved away from voting for the ANC. Now you see them going to all these other parties because they're just trying to mean something again. A youthful person always joins a cause because they feel like that cause will understand them. They're at that adolescent age, their hormones are going crazy, and they feel like the entire world is against them. So they just want a group of people that understand them. Hence why in many cults you find a lot of teenagers in there because they felt like they were in a place where they were truly understood, quote unquote, whereas they knew nothing about the world. That's why these teenagers left the ANC. They felt like the ANC didn't understand them anymore, despite having the ANC Youth League. That's why a young Julius Malemma left the ANC Youth League and stole their blueprint to start the EFF,
Yeah.
because he felt the ANC Youth League did not represent what he was fighting for anymore.
Yeah.
And as time went on, really, the youth became more and more distant from the ANC, like a deadbeat father and a child. It was a very toxic relationship. And in the end, this is that stage of the relationship where both parties are not on talking terms anymore. Many youthful people in this country don't even mention the ANC anymore. They've lost all their hope in it. They feel they're doing absolutely nothing except the absolutely basic things a government should already be doing, like I mentioned earlier. And, I was one of them. I was the child who was taught in public and private school that Mandela saved us, the ANC is the greatest party of all time. I was the fickle teenager who believed that voting for a party other than the ANC would lead to total destruction of the country. I was the teenager who would ask harsh and critical and thought-provoking and debate-sparking questions when I had to regarding the history of the ANC and why we should continue to be voting for a party that single-handedly exploits and emotionally blackmails us to continue voting for them. And which led me to my very, very healthy criticism of them, in the present time, not because I hate them or anything. There's not a piece of hate in my body, but there is a lot of thoughts and questions I have to ask. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying those questions need to be answered, but as a human being, everyone has a right to ask questions,
Yeah.
especially the people, especially the tax-paying youth, especially the tax-paying middle-class citizens who just want answers. And if your government can't give you answers, well, then they can at least give you the reason why they can't give you answers. And that's really why so much youth is behind me in what I say. When I first got in, I was expecting a lot of criticism, but it was actually the complete opposite. Everyone had a great feeling of relief that, finally
Yeah.
one of us is talking,
Yeah.
and it's not
Yeah.
them trying to charm us with their big words.
Yeah.
So I think over time, the relationship between the youth and the ANC just disbanded.
Yeah.
Many people of the youth don't even know what the ANC Youth League is, let alone know it still exists.
Yeah. Let me just ask you this question. I mean,
Yeah,
you're very eloquent and you're really able to formulate exactly what you want to say, and
thank you.
you present it very well, and that's, I guess, why you are so successful as well. But you are, after all, a young man, and my
Yeah.
first question in my mind is, how actively engaged are young people? Let's talk about I guess you kind of grew up in the city context. So the people in your sphere, in your world, how actively engaged are they in politics?
I think there's always been an interest into politics amongst young people. The problem was about whether they felt like they fit in or not.
Mm.
You know, since the beginning of time or since the beginning of politics, we were always told the term politics was big people talk. Those were topics for the older people. Young people don't speak about those topics because you either know nothing about it or you have no experience in it. A youthful person always has an interest in politics, but the question of whether they'll partake in the conversations is directly upon their decision. Majority end up not doing so, not because they lack their knowledge and understanding with it, but they also have fear. So I grew up in a very balanced household, a household that questioned everything and everything around us. And I'll be forever grateful for that. My parents asking me questions at a young age regarding political matters. My dad would just walk up to me when I'd be watching the great adventures of SpongeBob SquarePants, and he'd ask me, "Hey, did you see Zuma's speech this morning, son?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad, I did. What about it?" Because I don't care about him. I'm a kid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he said, "Well, what do you think of it? What do you think of it? You'll also grow up someday and you'll be watching him. So what do you think of him now?" And that's the type of people I grew up around.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
who didn't really believe in ceilings.
Yeah. Yeah.
They obviously, society will always be controlled with fear, especially South African society and the city places. Because one of the many main reasons why people don't talk about politics is simply because of the consequences of what may happen if you publicly entice your opinion. people are always afraid. And that's what makes it so different now. They always used to ask me, "Someone, what do you think is different from apartheid and now?" And I'd say people were afraid, and people aren't scared in politics anymore. Nowadays people are mocking Cyril online, doing the L sign to him, calling him cupcake. Back then, when Paul Kruger would walk in a room, you weren't allowed to do any of that. If you did, the security wasn't for you, wasn't for him. You know, it was a very different time with much more discipline and fear
Yeah,
enforced
yeah,
into the people.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of segregation. Now there's a lot more freedom, and because of that, there's a lot of more younger people who have an interest in politics.
yeah.
They're
Let me
not as
let, let me
opposed
let me
to,
let me interrupt you here.
yeah.
Once again, your presentation and the way and what you're saying and the substance that you bring to the table is really something to commend you for. It's very strong.
Thank you.
I really sit here and I really listen to what you're saying, and it's not only engaging, it makes a lot of sense as well. Young people tend to, when you're young, you tend to be more on the sort of liberal edges of things. You tend to push
Yeah.
the borders. I spoke to a young black man quite recently who told me, in his words, it refers to what I just said. Young people always you push the borders as you grow up. It's part of being young. He said to me that Julius Malema has pocketed the young people of South Africa. Is this young man that I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, black man, was he correct in saying that Julius Malema has got the youth in his pocket?
I mean, that is a question of how the South African citizen sees Malema as. There's many ways in which you can pocket South African youth, and Malema has unfortunately found the best way to do so. The best way to entice and coerce and manipulate a young person into doing whatever you want them to is making them feel at home, emotionally speaking, making them feel relevant. There's never been a time in South Africa where the youth have felt more irrelevant. The unemployment rate is above 60% amongst youth. It's mostly youthful people who test positive for HIV and AIDS because every kid is sleeping all over the place with no moral compass anymore. No, barely any young people are going to church. The Catholic faith has recently started resurfacing. You know, there's a lot more you as a Catholic myself, I know that nowadays there's a lot more youth going back to God, turning back to God, but they come when they're already 30 and 25. They've wasted all those years where they were 18, 19, when their hormones were going crazy and wanted to experiment with everything around the world. They've only come when they've experimented with everything and they've learned through life the hard way. And that's the problem. Why? Because there's people like Malema who know how to pocket them when they're at that primal phase. That
Yeah,
phase where they barely use any of their brains and just use their vital organs. I speak from a very logical standpoint, a very logical and understanding standpoint. When I say something, I always do my best to make sure the person who listens to me understands it without making it feel like I'm trying to get them to agree with me. So as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm speaking in a tone where I don't want you to agree with me, but you can definitely understand where I'm coming from.
mm,
With Malema, on the other hand, when you see him on the stadium, standing on his podium with 50,000 young people, and you see him chanting the idea of killing white people and glorifying it, and every other black young person over there screaming it with him, and him talking about how when he was in the ANC Youth League, it was a revolutionary house until corruption killed it, so he started the EFF to save us all from total destruction. He speaks in the tone of a man who not only says something you can understand, but in the tone of a man who wants you to agree with him. Kind of reminds me of a certain Austrian painter who got rejected from art school and started one of the most brutal regimes in Europe, you
mhm.
know, because that individual also spoke in a way of not only trying to make you understand him, but trying to make you agree with him.
Yeah,
And that's the thing with Malema. When he says something, he wants you to agree with him. And because of that, he uses a lot of emotional methods. I wouldn't call it blackmail because the ANC uses emotional blackmail so that you keep voting for them.
yeah,
The ANC is like a toxic partner who says, without me, you're nothing. I'm the one who saved you from this. The EFF is the type of person who uses your emotions and makes you believe that's what you believe. No, obviously, not every black young person in South Africa blames apartheid for the country's problems, thanks to individuals like myself and other content creators out there who speak with reason. But obviously, when Malema speaks to them, he's going to speak to them in a way that convinces them that that's what they actually believed the entire time, but they just didn't realize it. I think that's one of the many reasons why Malema has the youth in his pocket. I completely agree with the young individual you were talking to the other day.
Yeah.
Malema has a definite cult-like following. No
Yeah.
matter what he does, you can talk about all the scandals that he's been through in his life. He is as skinny as a stick now. You can see he's going through something. He will always have that cult following that believes he is the hero who's going to save this country from its mess.
Yeah.
That right there is the problem with South Africans because they're always selfish and believe someone is coming to save them. And Malema has actually come forward like a Jesus in the flesh and actually made them believe that that is true. He can come and save them. All he needs is their vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hence, he has a lot of youth in their pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the moment you promise something that big for something that small in return, you already have them. South Africans like big returns, small investment. They like quick success. They want instant gratification. It's like a drug most of us have. We don't want to put in any work, but we want the results as soon as possible. Malema offers that. Malema offers a quick route to success. Malema offers a quick way to satisfaction. Vote for me, we get all the whites out of here, and you're saved.
Yeah. Let me ask you about Kill the Boer.
Yeah.
I know what your viewpoints are, but just young people, how do they, a lot of young people or liberal-minded people say, well, Kill the Boer is not literally meant to kill a person. It is part of the resistance tradition, etc., and it's freedom of speech, etc., etc. How do you think young people actually understand the song and interpret the song?
To be honest with you, a lot of young people in South Africa don't even bother themselves when talking about the song because they know how heavy it is in context. They don't have a problem with the words in themselves, they have a problem with the meaning. Deep down, they know what it's about, despite the fact that the public media tries to make us believe the Kill the Poor song is just a song. They know what it means, and what I like about South Africa is its diversity. And because we have a diversity, we always love to respect one another, regardless of what your circumstances are, your race, or where you're from. And because of that, we do our best to try and not offend the other person and their community. You know, you can never talk about the Austrian painter to a German or a Jewish child. You can never talk about the Kill the Boer song to a white child. You can never glorify the apartheid regime with a black child because all these events, in some way, have almost destroyed these communities that were the victims of it. And because we respect that, the youth in South Africa barely ever partakes in that. But then you'll always have the hardcore Malema followers who will do whatever they can to justify the song. They say the Kill the Boer song was a struggle song. And I completely agree to that. It was a struggle song until the struggle ended. There really is no world where this struggle song exists.
Yeah.
If that's the case, they might as well bring the apartheid songs as well. And then we can see how the black people react, and then we can truly discuss the relevance of songs in our given times. And then we can really learn our lesson of how a song's relevance can change over time. Right? The Kill the Poor song certainly doesn't mean the same thing it meant when the Land Acts were happening in the 1910s. You know, it cannot because it's a completely different time. It's a democratic world. What are you doing glorifying the idea of killing white people in a world where democracy rules, in a world where equality is king? What are you doing, glorifying all these terrorist and anti-terrorist songs in a time where we're all supposed to be united? If anything, you're just trying to sow more division. Further evidence leading to the fact that Malema doesn't want any unity at all. He doesn't believe in it. He believes that by the white people being eliminated, that is the only way the black people can succeed. South Africans, he likes to say, despite the fact that many South Africans of other races were born and bred in the soil. And that really is our youth take on the Kill the Boer song. We don't like it because we know what it actually means. They tell us it's a struggle song, but we know the struggle ended. We weren't even born when the struggle ended. We were born far after the struggle ended. We're the golden kids, as they like to call us, because we were born into the golden age, where it was the 2000s and everything was going good. Everyone could be employed. It didn't matter if you were a woman or a black kid. You had the same opportunities. There was the reconciliation systems. There was the court hearings again. There was the protests and so forth. what are you doing singing such a song in a world like that? And that's really what questions and almost breaks down the entire foundation of the current version of the Kill the Boer song. So, South Africa, what majority of South African youth can say, because I obviously cannot talk for all South African youth. There's South African youth that are very convinced that I am lying through my teeth as I speak to you right now. But then there's also those who completely agree with what I say, which are actually the majority. So I speak for the majority, the logically thinking and understanding majority, who say the Kill the Boer song in 2025 is not the same as 1912 because the agenda is not there anymore. It is a struggle song, but the struggle is over. And there shouldn't be a world where that song is sang anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Let me get your viewpoint on a couple of things.
Yeah.
The sort of hot issues in South Africa. So I'm going to just mention the topic, and I'm going to give you the floor. Let's talk Black economic empowerment. Your view.
We all need performance BEE. Tie empowerment to job creation, manufacturing growth, township training, civic partner participation, accountable dashboards, not report launches every rat you penny tricked publicly. Exit clauses, not articles of clause. If you take a BEE deal and don't deliver employment, infrastructure, outsourcing, rewrite the contract and return the capital. Youth representation on investment panels, real youth, not ANC interns who track how 700 million rand spent on a meeting impacted their neighborhood. If you want my brand of compensation, fine, but empowerment must earn its title. Otherwise, it's appropriation of goodwill, not a system upgrade.
I think Black economic empowerment had a very great start, a very great motive to try and empower historically burdened Black citizens in South Africa. But then over time, as the Black hand put its hand on this and as it started getting funded by the wrong people who were always thinking about what was in it for them, it crumbled in the end. BEE went from something that was supposed to empower the Black people in South Africa who were oppressed for years to something that actually degrades them. It went from let's help the Black people and correct their historical injustices to Black people need BEE to succeed. It's almost insulting in this matter because not only does BEE not help Black people at all, it's still there just to help those ones in the inner circles of the corrupt politician elites who continue to benefit from it. I said in my other video, Ramaphosa is a billionaire because of BEE. Motsepe is a billionaire because of BEE. Good for them. They've exploited their way and they've made their money. That's fine. But it becomes a problem when you start using that over and over again and you only use that platform called that was supposed to be Black economic empowerment to only empower those in your circle. I thought this was for the people and by the people. That's why BEE started. But honestly speaking, the moment the wrong hands got onto BEE, it became the complete opposite of what it was there for. Now people look at it as a form of degradation because of how corrupt it's gotten. Some people think, as a Black person, I can't make it unless the system's rigged because of the morals BEE teaches us. It was supposed to have been something completely different, something completely helpful to the young Black individual who just wants to go and start his own company, who had dreams, who tried to break his cycle in the family, who didn't believe that his circumstances defined who he or she was. That was what Black economic empowerment was all about. That is Black economic empowerment. But because it fell into the wrong hands.
Is there also a culture in South Africa, and I'm going to make a reference to the kind of BEE that we have here in Europe, in the Netherlands. It's not called Black economic empowerment. It's called Affirmative Action, and it's very much part and parcel of what we confronted with here as well. I've told this in previous broadcasts, told some folks this, that if I am to go to an institution here to ask, for example, for a subsidy or funding of a project that I want to do, and I see that there is a Black chap who stands in the same queue, I know for a fact that this black chap is going to get the fund and I'm not going to get the fund. So it plays here in Europe as well. Now, my question, I'm a bit long-winded about this now, but my question isn't there a culture amongst black people, young black people as well, when you apply for a job or whatever the case might be, that you assume because you have a black skin, it's kind of said that you'll get the job. Is that become part of the way young black people also think today?
There's definitely those ones who still think like that because they always try to find solace in their pathetic shortcomings. They refuse to accept the fact that gone are the days where you are rejected at work because of the color of your skin,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're black, because of how favored we are in this country. Gone are the days where Richard Mapunya wanted to sell dairy and he didn't even have a selling license because he was a black guy. Those days are long gone. You
Mm-hmm.
live in an age where because you're black, you get picked first for the job. So when you see a young, youthful person talk like that, it's just to find solace in their own shortcomings.
Mm-hmm.
Young people will always find an excuse for their shortcomings if they're lazy. One of the many traits of a lazy person in general is because before they acknowledge they have a problem, they'll always find an excuse for it. I didn't go to the gym today because it was just way too cold. Yeah, but it wasn't too cold to have some ice cream, was it now?
Mm-hmm.
They'll just always find a reason for it. You know what? Because I was black, I didn't get the job. No, man, maybe it's because you had two distinctions and the white kid next to you had eight of them. Regardless of circumstances, regardless of where you're from, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter whose son you are, whose daughter you are, what bloodline you're in. What matters is your performance. And South African youth need to understand that. I've been invited into talks where I keep explaining to these rehab guys and these young kids in the hospitals that it's not about where you're from. No one cares about your disability. No one cares about your childhood trauma in this cruel, cold world. What they do care about is how much you can bring to the table and how much you can help yourself too. Once they see that you can help yourself, they are more than happy to invest in you because it means you can help them just as good as you've done for yourself.
Yeah, yeah. But let me now play devil's advocate here, and you're
Yeah.
now in the position of
All
Cyril.
right.
You're in the position of Cyril Ramaphosa, and you've gone through this whole process now of all these Afrikaner delegations who had gone to the United States of America, to Washington,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
come with their demands. I remind you of Ramaphosa's message on Dr. Corneille Mulder in Parliament as well. BE is here to stay. Um, if I play devil's advocate, I will have to say to you, well, the gap between the rich and the poor in South Africa has not shrunken. Uh, the
Not at all.
the income of the average black family in South Africa is still 5 times smaller than the average income of the white family.
Definitely.
65% of all, I think at least senior managers in business are still white, etc., etc. Black
Yeah.
economic power has not done what it should do. But here's the question, the devil's advocate question. You know as well as I do that they're not simply going to chuck it out of the system. It will not just disappear overnight. What
Mm.
do you offer the people or President Ramaphosa in the place of black economic empowerment?
Mental empowerment. It all starts in the mind. If you can't do it in here, then you should forget about everything else. If you haven't convinced yourself you're capable of doing it, forget about everything. You shouldn't even bother thinking about the idea. Mental empowerment is what the black people in South Africa desperately need. It's what's been stripped of them 100 years ago in the apartheid regime as well, when, the black people were taught that they were naturally inferior. It's all mental. It's the strongest version of slavery, mental slavery. They undid our physical chains, but the chains that are still bound into us are mental because we still believe that when we get the land back, everything will change. And only when we realize that that is the furthest piece from the truth, will we ever even, take a step forward. I'd start mentally. start mentally changing how these people think. You obviously can't do a lot for the elders in Soweto who have seen quite a lot because they've been around, but you definitely can do something for the little kid who's in grade one, the little black kid who's in grade one, who's just about to be taught of how inferior he is and how society is against him. You can do something. You can change the way he thinks. You change the school curriculum. Teach them about tax. Teach them about economics. Give them what they were not given in the regime that was made to oppress them. What the regime did, you do the complete opposite. The regime told them they were inferior and made sure they kept it in their heads forever. You do the opposite. You tell them they are just as capable. And because of that, we are here to help. You can give a young black person all the money in the world. It will burn just as fast as they got it if you don't have the right mindset. That's the problem with South Africa. Recently, they talked about investing 700 million rand into a talk of how to save the youth.
Yeah.
As if we already don't know what to do. We know what to do. Let alone
Talking,
spend
are you
700
talking
million.
about this dialogue that is meant to be held in
Yes,
the, yeah.
yes, yes. The dialogue that costs about 700 houses, 700 average homes in South Africa. You can buy 700 average, good, well-sized homes with the amount of money they'll spend in a talk. And that tells you where our minds are. Our minds are not in idea, planning, and execution. Our minds are victim, victim, victim. In the average young black person's mind, they are always the victim. We need to change that. They are always the prey of the situation. Even in the workplace, there's a reason the white child still, you know, gets a better income. There's a reason why the average white family makes more money, like you mentioned. It couldn't, sometimes you find very strange cases where the white family doesn't earn as much as the black family down the street, but the white family lives so much better than they do because it's mindset. The white family knows how to build. The black family only knows how to play victim. They don't know how to build. They were stripped of it. Their land was taken from them and they were taught they can't build. They're not meant for it. And we need to change that. It all starts in the mind. And, I used to say that for years. You give the kid a fish, you just feed him for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. The black people were told they weren't able to fish. And what we need to do is to tell them that they can. And not only can they fish, we need to teach them how to. And only then can we move forward. Change in mindset. That's how I got this far. I had to do a lot of my self-study, ask questions, change in mindset. I grew up with parents who thought completely differently from their circles. They grew up in circles of fear and of oppression. My parents had it very hard. They grew up in prime apartheid, prime apartheid, prime persecution of Christians and so forth. They saw it all. And the fact that they were able to come out of all of that concrete that was meant to hold them down and still mold a positive way of looking into life and how they can manifest their own success really inspired me, and which told me that once someone can change their mindset, they can really do anything they put their mind into in life. But until the average black kid learns that, nothing is going to change for them.
Do you think it's possible to develop the country without some forms of governmental interference and social engineering in
For
South
sure,
Africa?
for
Uh,
sure. Independence is always motivated, but that's what our government will never tell us. A toxic government will do nothing for the country, but still convince them they need them.
mhm.
That's exactly what the African National Congress has done for us. Nothing, while also convincing us that we need them. Because if we don't, you don't want to know what happens if you don't vote for the ANC. What if we go back to apartheid if you vote for a party that's not ANC? Always that fear, be careful what you wish for because if you don't vote ANC, something bad might happen. But at the same time, the ANC is not doing anything. There is no reason to keep them there. The ANC will always make us believe we need government to be successful. And that's not the case. And once the people wake up and decide we are going to be independent and more private sectors will be introduced and more motivated, that is when the people will get their power back. And that will be the complete irrelevance of government as we know it. and that will force them to improve because now the people will have so much power at that stage, they can influence the many decisions of those who vote for them. So we definitely can do it without the government, but now the government has its duties. That's why they're there in the first place. And we've also been put in a situation where we believe the country cannot do anything without them, like a toxic relationship where the partner feels she cannot do anything without him, despite how abusive he is and how much she wants to leave the relationship. South Africa really wants to leave the relationship with the ANC, but they're just so scared of what might happen if they leave because they need the ANC. They don't. But we've been convinced that we do because they saved us that one time.
Yeah. Do young people think that in formulating policy in South Africa, we still have to do it against the backdrop of the past of the country, of our apartheid history?
We should have done that the same year we were saved from the regime, and I'll explain why. There are many communities who are oppressed. It's not just black people. The Jewish community was oppressed for years, but they didn't talk about correcting historical injustices. They said, what can we do to continue to support each other and move forward as a people? The black people could have done the very same thing, but they were so traumatized and so convinced that there is no way they can move forward in life except for going back and correcting historical injustices. We were taught that in order to take a step forward, we should take a step back. When you take a step forward and you take a step back, you have moved nowhere. And that is exactly the direction we have moved for 30 plus years. Absolutely nowhere. Because we've been convinced that it is only by correcting historical injustices we can actually move forward as a country. No, by focusing on correcting historical injustices, you move nowhere because you will always cling to the past without any plans for the future, really. You ask a black person down the street where they see themselves in 30 years, they couldn't tell you. You ask them why they don't have a job, they'll blame racism. It's how they've been taught to think, unfortunately. I wish we were in a world where South Africans said, look, it's been 30 plus years. Obviously, these people are messing with us. It's time we start thinking for ourselves, enforce independence and power amongst our youth, and we will be the country we wanted to see. We will be the change we wanted to see. But instead, unfortunately, not all wishes go that way, especially if people don't think the same and don't agree with each other. There are still people out there who believe the ANC is doing everything and everything right, who do believe historical injustices must be corrected, who do believe by expropriating land without compensation is the only way. You can take that land, but if you're going to do nothing with it in the end, then there's no point, really. And because of that, that is why I think South Africa should have done this a lot earlier. We should have taken advantage from the very beginning and said, like what Mandela said, you need to forgive and you move forward. Don't try to correct historical injustices. The moment you start talking about BEE and all of that, you convince the black people that they cannot move forward until something is done for them because of what was done to them in the past.
Just about the youth today, your take on it. Do you think 30 years post-apartheid, 30 years of ANC rule, do you think that amongst young people, the way you grow up and the privileges that you seem to get through the new system, that there's a culture of expectation created amongst young people? In other words, as a young black person, I will have it easier.
Definitely.
That's part of young culture today.
I'd say yes, but not in terms of race.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the mindset we're going to have it easier because we don't live in any oppressive regime that's against us or any color, really. We're human beings.
But is that mindset, what I'm trying to get at, is that mindset such that it says, well, the system privileged me now. It's my turn now. So merely because I have a darker skin, I will have more access than my white brother.
There's definitely those ones who think like that. They're always there. They're always there. They always go, no, they oppressed us. It's our turn now. We're doing this all again, except this time we're on top. And that's why Malemma has so many supporters. Because you have so many young people who think like that. It's scary to think about, but you have that many young people who think like that and who are willing to agree with him and everything else he says. It's a very reverse way of thinking. That is not what Mandela stood for. That is not what Joe Slovo stood for. That is not what Chris Hani was assassinated for. All these heroes, that is not what they died for. They died for a united South Africa. Martin Luther King did not dream of a world where black kids were having revenge on white kids and other racial minorities. He dreamt of a world where everyone was holding hands and there was complete unity because we're human beings. He didn't dream of a world where revenge was the key.
Yeah, yeah.
Revenge,
I'm
and
gonna
yeah,
interrupt again because we're running out of time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
as an Afrikaner, I was brought up with within a certain culture. Part of that
Mm,
culture was kind of hold your head high, um, keep on working hard, a kind of a work ethic, a do-it-yourself attitude. In Afrikaans, we say 'n boer maak 'n plan. That's all part of my culture.
mm,
Um, Am I right if I say that those that are privileged today, or assume that they are privileged today, the black youth there, that they
mm.
miss out on the opportunity of actually growing within them the strength of the culture that says, I can do it by myself, or I have the
Yeah,
strength to do it, push through. That kind of, I think even Thabo Mbeki complimented particularly the Afrikaner on this aspect of his culture, the boer maak 'n plan culture. I think the Afrikaans word is selfredingskap. To if the state doesn't supply it, we'll do it ourselves. My question to you is, do you think that young black people are robbed of that culture that says because of the dependency that is created on in this new generation? It's a very clumsy way in which I'm asking the question, so maybe you're
no
not getting the
problem,
point
no
of the
problem.
question, but yeah, I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. They have been robbed always. And not only were they the ones that were robbed, their parents were robbed of that mindset, their grandparents were robbed of that mindset. It's generational trauma and generational oppression. That's one of the many mental chains that were put upon us that we fail to notice are there because part of the reason why mental chains are so good, arguably the best reason why mental oppressive chains are so good, is because the person barely notices them at all. You know, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled on earth was convincing it had never existed. The greatest trick slave owners ever pulled on slaves was making them believe that the moment they unchained them physically, they were free forever. That was not true. They always had control of them here, like kids and the internet these days. And because of that, you have a lot of black kids who miss out on how much they could actually achieve because
Mhm.
they don't believe they can do it themselves. They believe they need leverage, which is actually really sad because what that tells me is that there's still a bunch of black kids out there who still feel like they're less than, who still feel like they cannot do it if the game is not rigged. And that's the result in the end. You get a lot of these black kids who think negatively. And because they think negatively, it leads them backwards in life, despite all the benefits South Africa has for black youth right
And
now.
made
Yeah.
them dependent on affirmative action.
Yeah, it made them very dependent. Nowadays, you look at these local universities, you wonder why is this protesting? Why is this protesting? Fees must fall. We want free education. We want this. We want this. The NSFAS money is not enough. We want, we want, we want. It's never sit down and think, what can I do? What can I do?
Yeah,
What can I do?
yeah, yeah,
It's always let's get outside, let's get a bunch of pitchforks and signs and say, we want, we want, we want. That's how they've been taught to think.
yeah,
They've been taught
yeah.
to think they should be given everything. And if they're not given everything, then they cannot move forward.
Yeah. Well, there's what I'm trying to really get is that self-do boer maak 'n plan in Afrikaans. The boer makes a plan. Part of the culture is a very powerful asset to one's
Indeed.
life
Indeed.
for your development. We have to close this down. We're really way over time, but I want to just, for the fun of it,
Yeah, yeah.
test you
Oh,
on
yeah.
more or less my last question to you, Sama. I spoke to
Mhm.
Ike Kumalo a couple of weeks
Wow.
ago, and
Wow.
you know as well as I do that Kumalo is out there saying to the world that In a lot of ways, we had it better in the days of apartheid. And I think if you are sophisticated, you know what Khumalo is meaning. He doesn't mean that he
Yeah,
wants to go back to the days of apartheid, but
yeah.
things worked, street lamps worked, there were systems, etc., etc., etc. So how do you, as a proud young black man, feel about your government? And if I say your government now, I'm being very cynical, perhaps, because the
Mm,
assumption is that the African National Congress is equated to a black government. So the idea
that's
of
true.
the black government who has been in charge of our beautiful country for the past 30 years, who has literally
Mm,
destroyed everything from A to Z, who has really
mm.
smashed the country down in 30 years in ways in which it cannot.
Boy, oh boy, have they.
How do you feel and you're a proud man, I know that, as a proud young
Thank
black
you.
person, how do you feel about that?
Well, it's two sides, right? So the first feeling is I definitely agree with the fact that apartheid had better systems, was more strict, had more discipline, things were cheaper, the roads were cleaner, the hospitals were safer, there was less crime, less femicide, less farm murders, all of that. But I think we're going a little too far when we say everything was better at the time. It's not better when you live in a system that oppresses people due to their skin color, where you live in a system where at any given time a tank could just come to the neighborhood and, all these soldiers just get in and terrorize the entire household, raid these homes and so forth. That was true genocide. You know, it's not good when you live in a very nice, economically good regime that isn't really so good morally. That's why South Africa was banned from partaking in a lot of things internationally at the time. Not because they hated us or anything, but they saw what was going on. If there was nothing wrong with apartheid, then why'd they ban us? There was nothing wrong. We could have just participated in everything else. There wouldn't have been a need for the ANC to exist at all. But the fact that history has happened the way it has tells you something wasn't right. And by God's grace, we live in a South Africa where we know that people shouldn't be judged by color. So I certainly agree with the fact that at the time of the apartheid regime, the roads were cleaner. I could go on and on. You name it, economically, it was probably better during apartheid than right now. But morally speaking, educationally speaking, land-wise, and all of that, it wasn't. There were favorites. It was done to favor a race of people. There was a racial hierarchy that was completely evil and had to be destroyed for the good of the people of South Africa, the good of God's people, which was every living South African, not just the oppressed black South Africans, but every single South African who wanted to have an equal world. But because of that, we've been emotionally blackmailed into thinking because they saved us from that, we can have roads with potholes and unclean hospitals and femicides and trafficked children. And it's very unfortunate. It doesn't hurt to have a clean world, an economically dependent world, while also having equality. I used to always joke about this with my friend. South Africa is a very weird country. When we were racially oppressive, we were economically good. Now that we're good, we're no more racially oppressive as such, we're economically terrible. There's always one and not the other. Why can't we have both? Because you have people with certain agendas in there.
Yeah. Last question. Do you think
Yeah.
that I still want to just go back to that for now,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and perhaps I'm being racist now, and one could accuse me of racism now. But when you walk through the streets of Johannesburg, I did an interview the other day with a young black man who makes films about Johannesburg, and he shared some of his
Mm,
films with me. And
yeah,
Johannesburg is part of my youth. It's part of my life
yeah,
I
yeah.
spent in Johannesburg. There must be a sense of shame that you feel, a sense of wow. Um, I don't want to say co-responsibility for it all, but there must be a sense of we've done this. We have really, really, really destroyed this country under
Definitely.
this regime. And then perhaps the question should be kinder and should ask you, Do you think that we will survive the African National Congress?
God will never let his people down. You know, he put people in a giant ark when the world experienced the biggest natural disaster recorded in history. If he could do that, then South Africans will always survive whatever's put against them. We survived many things. We even survived the very traumatizing night the Springboks lost to New Zealand in a scoreline I'm just so afraid to mention right now. If we could survive that, hey, we can survive a lot of other things. We've survived stage 6 load shedding. And there always is that guilt. There's black people who, when I like drive with my family or so forth, or my friends, they'd go, man, you can really tell there's black people living here now. Look at this place. And we're just messing around with each other. But as much as we don't want to admit it, it's true. When this was white dominated, it didn't look like that. It looked like a proper city. It was first class. Joburg was Joburg, But now, the moment a black hand got on it, it got dirty. It didn't have to, but that's how we think. That's our mentality. We always want something done for us. We can't do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So when someone comes around telling us that, look, man, the city is way dirtier since you came into power, we don't want to hear that because we're the victims here, And until we stop thinking like that, nothing is going to change. There's nice places still, like Sandton and so forth, that still have a decent amount of white people. Wait till they all leave. I'm willing to bet you that place will also look like a dumpster in the next 10 years. Hillbrow was amazing. I saw the old pictures of Hillbrow when I was studying the history of Hillbrow the other day. My mentor, one of my academic mentors as a child, he is a white man. He used to go get ice cream there. Hillbrow was amazing. There was an amusement park there where he used to go. It wasn't a fixed amusement park. They'd like move around like what the Rand show used to do.
Yeah. I told this to Ike the other day. I said, I was a young man of 20, 21 years old, or something like that. I lived in the heart of Hillbrow. 2:00 at night time, if I ran out of cigarettes, I was able to go walk to, I think it's called High Point, which is absolutely the center of Hillbrow. And I would walk through the streets without no fear, not a problem.
Not at all. Not at all. Now you can't even do that in broad daylight.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't even do that in your own car. You could be going there in a stop sign and then 4 guys with guns just come at you. Now what?
Yeah.
Unless you drive away like really fast. That's how scary it is. And unfortunately, there always will be that guilt. Obviously, there's those black people who will always say, no, nothing is wrong. I don't see anything wrong. You're just a racist for saying that. What? You're trying to say you want apartheid back? Always get very defensive because they don't want to admit something when they must.
Yeah.
But then there's always those black people who go, we had it hard. But we have to admit, the whites definitely handled this better than we did.
Well, on that note, thank you very much for this discussion.
Thank you.
I hope to invite you back again. I find it absolutely delightful to talk to you. Much success with your podcast. Keep on doing what you're doing. I think you're great at doing what you're doing. And thank you very, very, very much for indulging in me today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me. May this be one of many. I did predict I was coming back after the first interview. Here I am.
We're going to do this again. Thanks so much. All the best to you.
Thank you.